Hello and welcome to Back of the Net Live on a Monday night. I hope you're well. I hope you had a good weekend in these strange times. Let's talk football. That's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about our England 11s in the Premier League era. And I think it's really important to establish that before people start screaming in the chat and screaming at the screens that we've left the likes of Bobby Moore out and etc., and Gary Lineker's and things like that. It's the Premier League era. We had to focus this down, otherwise we would have been here for a very, very long time. And we still might be. We're going to go until this debate is done. And I'm delighted that tonight we have Mr. Jim Cooper joining us. Jim, very good evening to you.
Evening, Ben. Evening, chaps.
Jody Brown is back once again on a Monday night. And Neil Baker makes his Monday night debut, I think. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
So, Jody, you sparked this debate when you mentioned that you left a certain England record goal scorer out of your all-time England 11. Now, I don't want you to reveal anything right now, but I wonder if that's changed because we've made it a Premier League 11. We'll find out. But you started this all off for us last week, didn't you?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
You sparked the debate in the WhatsApp group, and I thought it was quite a nice one for people to get involved in. Everyone kind of wants to get involved in that kind of debate, don't they, about England?
I used to spend whole coach journeys to and from away games doing Premier League 11s, England 11s, arguing with my assistant, and they used to get quite heated, the arguments, so I'm used to these debates.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and before we begin and get our first team up, please do get involved with the debate tonight. This is something that everybody can get involved in. Let us know your all-time England 11 Premier League years, Premier League era. So I guess the first thing that we need to do before we go through the first team is just to establish that criteria. So when we talk about Premier League era, are we then reflecting the team on how good the player was for their club, how good they were for England during that period, or in general, how good they are for the Premier League era? What's the kind of criteria around this? How are we selecting our teams?
Who's going?
Off your own back, innit? You'll justify your own selections right now.
So we're really open criteria, just what you think. There's nothing you've particularly looked at and said, well, you know what, in the Premier League he was devastating, so I've put him in the England squad, or he was actually devastating for England. We're just saying however you feel. Is that right, Jim?
Well, I'd be surprised if the other two go against any of my selections anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, Coops.
I'll just get something out of the way at the beginning. There certainly ain't any West Ham players in there.
No, okay, yeah, I get that.
Bakes, who do you support? I
West Ham as well, so...
Dear.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that. Oh, sorry.
Did you not?
Oh, yeah.
So we've got a couple of Chelsea fans in here, haven't we? So that's we've got a Man U fan, so that's just going to be interesting. But I don't think there's any bias in picking these players, but we'll find out. Do let us know if you agree. Right, let's, without further hesitation, let's get the first team up, and it's going to be yours, Jim. And apologies, Neil, because it's going to cover you up slightly because they're all in the bottom right hand corner. I've just realised. But Jim, this is your team. This is what you've gone for. So you've gone for David Seaman in goal. You've gone for Gary Neville, Ashley Cole at the fullbacks, John Terry, Rio Ferdinand, and I know that you've gone for a diamond: Steven Gerrard, Beckham, Lampard, and Gascoigne, with Kane and Rooney up front. Before we get into Bakes and Jody picking this apart, tell us why you've chosen that team.
I think the midfield the four names you've mentioned there, they're all legends in the game anyway. And I know that some of you guys probably wouldn't have that four, but so Lampard for me had to be in there. You know, he's the highest goal scorer for England from a midfield position. He scored 29 goals in 106 games. So he scored one goal in every 3.5 games. Should have been 30 goals if that won the World Cup against Germany, which should have stood. Bex, I think you've got to have him in there for distribution and creating chances for the front two. Gerrard, there's always that argument when it, where do you play Gerrard, Lampard together? I'd have him sitting because of his range of passing and push Lampard a little bit forward more because, as I say, he scores more goals. And then Gascoigne, I'll put Gascoigne in just purely for the fact of that goal against Scotland in the Euros, against the old enemy. Fantastic player, creative, innovative. He was a bit ahead of his game at the time, I think. Front two, maybe a little bit contrary to other people's opinion, but Harry Kane has scored 32 goals in 45 games. Now, he's literally just started out his career, his England career as well. So I thought long and hard about putting him in there, but a Golden Boot winner in a World Cup, so I think he deserves his place. And that's hard for me to put a Tottenham player in, I'll tell you. And then Rooney up top, well, he's the England all-time goal scorer, so he's in there. Back four, easy ones for me. Ashley Cole on the left, him and Lampard can play down the left-hand side, know each other quite well. Gary Neville at right back, him and Bex can partner up quite well there. And then John Terry, I don't think you put little C around the captain. He's the captain of England, without a shadow of a doubt. And Rio Ferdinand, who I think John Terry would need beside him, if I'm honest, because although John Terry wasn't blessed with pace, he could read the game very, very well. But Ferdinand had that pace, and both of them good on the ball, good distribution. And then Seaman in goal, always reliable, I suppose, apart from, was it the Ronaldinho cross come shot or whatever it was many, many years ago. But 75 caps. So that's my lineup.
There you go. Put it in a better place now, Neil, so you can be on screen.
I think it's probably a good place to have it, to be honest.
So let's have a look at
his eyebrows raised a couple of times at him.
Yeah, it's quite a few.
So, Neil, what do you think? What do you think of the lineup?
I mean, listen, it's a fantastic team, isn't it? You can't sort of sit there. I think you put any of those players in a side, and it's a fab team. I've got one or two, changes to that. I think maybe potentially three changes. The one for me is Gaza, unbelievable player in his time, but if we're talking Premier League, I think he only made his debut in the Premier League in 1998, I think, for Middlesbrough and then Everton. So I wouldn't say that, if we're talking Premier League era, then he was at his best. I know he was obviously around in 96 and whatever else, but I think he was in, Lazio or Rangers at the time. So I wouldn't have Gaza in. But I mean, I think the if you're going for a back four, I don't think there's another back four that you could go with. I think it's Ashley Cole was probably one of the best left backs, that England have produced. I would say a right back, I think Gary Neville gets in, but I wouldn't say we've really ever had any world-class right backs. I think he's a really good player. I think he's really solid, and as Coop said, would have a great partnership with Beckham. But outside of that, I think it's a cracking team, really.
One thing?
Pick up quick on the Gascoigne thing with Bates. Who's going to take him seriously when he described my team as a fab team? Sorry. You lost it from that point, mate.
Sorry, mate.
Before I ask Jody about this team, I just want to go back onto the right back position, because I know that nobody has selected this player. We talk about Premier League era. We said that was the one criteria, so it's just performance really, and having been involved in the Premier League. Nobody's selected Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back. I know that it would be a tough one because he hasn't played for that long. Gary Neville played for a number of years in a number of tournaments for England, but he's pushing already, isn't he? To be in, when you talk in 10 years' time, you wouldn't be surprised if he was on the all-time list of England right backs with the amount of assists and his performances for Liverpool in the Premier League, which was one of our criteria. It's pretty good.
He's got about 2 caps, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, but we didn't put that as a crioria, did we? Really, we said it was open.
Well, no, I know, but we could pick a 16-year-old then, couldn't we?
No, but would you not agree that Trent Alexander-Arnold...
We could go and unearth some kid out of Chelsea's academy and say,
well, no,
I'll be the best player ever in England.
I'll put it another way then.
Trent Alexander is in a great team, and there's lots to admire about him, but I mean, he hasn't even, for me, he's not even ahead of Kyle Walker yet in terms of picking an England 11 from the Premier League era. Kyle Walker's got Premier League medals under his belt. He's had a very good World Cup one year. I can't remember which one it was. And he wasn't in that team. And he's unlikely to get in any of our teams, I suspect. But he's been a very good Premier League right back. Trent Alexander, for me, is just too fresh. He just hasn't enough football.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hype about him, obviously, because he's playing in that Liverpool team at the moment, and they are so good going forward and attacking. I would say the jury's still out on him for being a great or anything like that, because he's only just really come onto the scene for me.
But when you talk about that kind of criteria, I remember seeing Monday Night Football shows on Sky, and I see other shows as well that are picking their greatest all-time Premier League teams, and half the Liverpool squad at the moment are in it. And as Roy Keane points out on a number of occasions, they've not even won the Premier League. We're talking about this Liverpool. We are talking.
What do they know? Sky Sports.
But all right, I get it, but forget Sky Sports. We're talking about that Liverpool team as being. If I ask people now, if we were sat in a pub and we're saying that Liverpool team, one of the greatest all-time Premier League, bearing in mind that only started at the early 90s, Liverpool, one of the greatest teams to have played in the Premier League as a team, they haven't even won the Premier League, and we're giving them that accolade.
Yeah, but the only thing is you can be a great team without having all the great players. And I think the thing with Liverpool, like, without going into the tactics of how they play, but their energy levels, their pressing, and that is very, very admirable. And that isn't because of outstanding players. That's because of the way they've been coached and their athleticism, their togetherness, and probably their hunger to finally go and get a title. But if you look through their team, taking out Van Dijk at the back and the couple of world-class front players they've got, I don't think the rest of them get in any sort of all-time 11 ever.
Do you not think that, I mean, you say about the way they were coached, I know we're going slightly off topic here, but this is what the show's meant for. If Jim Cooper was the manager of Liverpool for next season, would he get the same results out of those players? You're saying he wouldn't because they're not saying that Jim's not as good as Jurgen Klopp, but you're saying that he wouldn't because they're not that great of players and it's all down to the manager.
I'm not sure they would handle one of Coops' rants at half time.
I'm not sure. Jokes aside, I'm not sure that Klopp will ever get it out of them again.
Really interesting.
I don't think they'll set the same standards whenever we restart as what they set in the season we're in the middle of now. I can't see them having a gap like that between them and the rest of the clubs ever again.
I think that's a great statement. I've got to be honest. I agree with that, but I don't know whether or not that's down to other clubs underperforming again. As similar to when Leicester won the Premier League or not, but I mean they are a phenomenal side, and all the attributes that Jody mentioned about work rate, togetherness, and hunger, they got that in spades. Unbelievable. So
I think you got a lot of teams in transition at the moment, and Liverpool aren't in transition. Klopp's been there 4 or 5 years. You got Chelsea under Lampard, you got Tottenham under Mourinho, you got Arsenal have had Emery and what's his name, Arteta this season, and Man United have been in constant transition since Alex Ferguson left. They've had 4 or 5 managers. Man City have just sort of seen their squad start to age. I think the loss of Vincent Kompany was a massive loss to their dressing room. Silva getting older, so I think it was a time for Liverpool to dominate.
So just moving back to the England debate before we move off of Jim's team, and we'll go on to mine because we're going to go round in a clockwise direction. Jim, just a couple of questions on that. Obviously, you've got Harry Kane in. You haven't got Alan Shearer. I mentioned criteria at the beginning. England criteria. You'd have looked at how good they've been for England, how good they've been in the Premier League. How can you leave Alan Shearer out and put Harry Kane and Wayne Rooney in?
Because of the goal stats for me. Shearer, legend, brilliant centre forward. If I'd have played 3 up top, I'd have had all 3 of them. Or they'd start the opposition, but definitely Shearer. I'm sure. I wouldn't be too surprised if he's in the other guy's team. But for me, Harry Kane, 32 goals in 45 games is some return, and I genuinely believe he could be one of the best forwards in the world if he ain't already.
Jim, I think he's going to go on and probably smash loads of goal scoring records. But in terms of his England return, do you not? I haven't got it in front of me, but do you not think he scored a lot of goals against some poor teams? Hat tricks against Panama. I'm not being funny. There's Ryman League players could nick hat tricks against Panama. They're basically part time, and he got to play them in a World Cup, and I can remember a few others as well. But I agree. What he could end up being is scary, really, because of the amount of goals he's already got. He's likely to beat Rooney and Shearer. I think, in terms of the England goal ratios.
His problem might be his injuries, though, because he is starting to pick up injuries. I think he's had a few issues now, hasn't he? So that might, I think, his ankle. Has he done that twice now?
Yeah.
I remember from when I was playing, once I did my ankle ligaments once, it was just always susceptible. So that might be, his problem, because you would have said the same about Michael Owen. What an unbelievable striker he was. I remember, I was same age as him growing up, and he was just electric for years. And I think it was his hamstring injury that probably cost him his career. With his pace, because that was his big selling point, wasn't it? His pace of getting in behind and scoring goals. Because I don't think he was naturally the best player. And I think, if Kane has those issues with his ankle, maybe that might curtail him, because I think otherwise Michael Owen would have been probably our top goal scorer, because he was incredible, and I would have probably had him in my side if it hadn't been for his injury record.
So just on the strikers again, final point on before we move on from Jim's team, final 2 points really. Wayne Rooney, you could say they're similar to Harry Kane, that Jody said a lot of his goals, that was his criticism for England, wasn't it? That he scored goals against teams that weren't great, but he still got the goals. Obviously, England's...
You know what, mate? Regardless, 53 goals in 120 games, that is some record, to be fair, international record. And I also think that I'll put him in there because he's very versatile. He's, he can play off of a front man as well, can't he? So... fantastic player. I mean, listen, Shearer...
He wasn't just a goal scorer, Rooney, was he? He was more than a goal scorer.
No. Yeah.
I think, was it 2006 when he come on the set? Was it 2006? I can't... The Euros, and he terrorised the tournament. I remember him running past like world class. I think, was it Desai? Did they play France? Running past world class players when he was about 17, 18, and
what player?
He was a special talent, Rooney.
Special talent, and I've left him out. But before we move on to my team, I just want to say one thing, and we can talk about it right now, and we probably don't need to mention it again, because we all have gone for the same person. Goalkeeper during the Premier League era, there is no other goalkeeper really, we're looking down the list, than David Seaman.
Not for me. I don't think we've been blessed with, probably since the likes of Shilton, and I don't think we've been blessed with unbelievable goalkeepers. David Seaman, I think he was, steady as a rock. He's done it for years at Arsenal and for England. So as Coop said, he's probably had one or two mistakes that were highlighted, the Ronaldinho one in particular, but on the whole he was dependable, and that's what you want in a keeper.
Yeah, so David Seaman's in all of our teams. Don't want to, a bit of a spoiler alert, but he's there. No one went for Rob Green or David James. Right, let's get Jim's team off. We're going to put mine on. So this was the team that I went for, and before I let you guys pick this to pieces, obviously the same goalkeeper that we've all chosen. Gary Neville, I think, as you guys said, we don't really have too many options at right back. Now, I went for Stuart Pearce. There is a theme in this team, and I think what I mentioned at the beginning, Premier League, how well you've done, but also for England. And my only criticism of some of the players that are great stars in the Premier League and great players for England, how well they did for England. And for me, Euro 96 was probably... Italian 90, I was very young. And I know I might be slightly younger than some, but... Euro 96 for me, we were absolutely devastating. Should have won that tournament, and the players really performed. So you can see a little bit of a theme in that team. Stuart Pearce is my left back. I think he was I'd rather have him. I thought about who I'd want to have if I was a manager, and I'd rather have Stuart Pearce than Ashley Cole. I thought he was absolutely immense. Yeah. Tony Adams and in for John Terry. For me, Adams during Euro 96 was absolutely outstanding. And what a leader, what a captain. I know there's not very much in this. I'm just trying to pick out the players that we were different in. And then we've got Steven Gerrard, we've all got Beckham, Scholes for me. That's a debate that we're going to have. The most gifted player on the ball. I think his passing range is up there with Beckham's. His touch is up there with Rooney's. And I've gone Shearer and Sheringham because I think their partnership was outstanding in Euro 96. Sheringham is obviously a fantastic player. And I was just thinking, dropping off Sheringham and Shearer, that works for me. And I can't leave out Gascoigne. And it was really close between him and Rooney because I thought Rooney can play that position as well. And I know it's controversial, but Gascoigne got in there. So for me, that would be my Premier League era all-time England 11. What's your thoughts, Jim Cooper?
Well, there's not one Chelsea player in your 11 there. I appreciate, those champions of Europe. I don't know how you can't have Lampard in there, mate. He came runner-up in the Ballon d'Or, I think it was. He was classed as the second best player in the world in 1 year, and that was during his
280 career goals from midfield.
Exactly, mate. It's just ridiculous that you have not got him in there. But then you're a Londoner who supports Man United, so I think you're a little bit. Listen, I'll get you Stuart Pearce.
You give me that one, yeah?
No. I get why you've put it in, and there are some good reasons, but Ashley Cole, for me, one of the best left backs in world football.
Yeah. I think just on the Lampard thing, I know.
How many caps has Ashley Cole got? 125.
120 plus, yeah.
7, Ashley Cole.
I'll find out some stats on Stuart Pearce in a minute. I just want to say, I know that we give each other a lot of stick, and we have given each other a lot of stick in our group about Lampard and Scholes, because I think that's probably the choice. For me, Paul Scholes is absolutely magnificent, and it was close. I don't think either of them did it particularly for England as much as some of the other players that you look at, the Beckhams, the Shearers, Gascoigne's, obviously you're talking about Italian 90s, Seaman.
But Jim has told you the stat that Lampard's the highest midfield goal scorer for England.
There's just something about it. Before, I just don't think they really said it like.
And in fairness to Lampard, he turned up at tournaments.
Yeah.
He actually turned up and played well in tournaments.
For me, Jody, it's Paul Scholes all day long. So that's just the way it is in my team.
I understand that. Scholes is unbelievable. You only have to hear what the other pros say about him to know that Scholes has to be there or thereabouts.
I would. This is controversial, but we said it was our own criteria, and we weren't particularly looking just on England. We were looking at the Premier League years. My opinion is that Lampard was much better for England, but Scholes is the better player. Even though Jim will tell me the stats don't say that, but he's looking at assists and goals. Scholes would get into a Premier League team above Lampard if you were to look at the 20 years, and that might just be again on winning medals. I mean, God knows how many medals. I know Lampard's got a few, but Scholes has obviously got a lot more.
Lampard's got a few.
So how many Premier League title winning medals has Lampard got?
He's won everything in the game.
Yeah, but so has Scholes.
Multiple times.
Scholes has got to have more winning medals than Lampard. Yeah, exactly. So there we go, and a few more of other stuff.
I'm staying out of this debate until my team comes up. So.
What do we think around Sheringham, though? You haven't really mentioned that. Sheringham in, I guess it's much of a muchness, is it, for strikers? Are we saying sort of Owen, Sheringham, Shearer, Rooney? I know we've left out Rooney, but we had some good strikers, haven't we, in the Premier League era? Yeah,
I mean, for having Sheringham, that's about a partnership, isn't it? You're purely basing that on the 1996. How well they played as a partnership together. That's why you've got it. For me, Sheringham wouldn't be anywhere near the top of our strikers. I think he was a quality player, don't get me wrong, but for me, he wouldn't be anywhere near. I know he had a great tournament in '96, but I think goal return and I don't know, there was just something, he was a classy player, but for me, he wasn't a world-class player.
And the final one I just want to go back to Jim on is, and I'm not going to ask Jody, and I know why, but Jim, Tony, I know that you're a big John Terry fan. If you were playing a different formation and you were having three at the back, would Tony Adams be the next centre-back in for you for England?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about Tony Adams, rate him highly, good Dagenham boy as well. So, at least he's a leader, isn't he? He was close to making the team, but no. Sorry, mate, John Terry.
Okay, let's get rid of my team and let's bring up Jody's team. Now, Jody's gone for a slightly different formation. You're playing three at the back, aren't you, Jody? Talk us through your team.
Yeah, I've gone for a 3-5-2. Main reason is just to get the players in that I wanted to get in. As you've all said, probably haven't had a world-class right back, so I've put Beckham as a right wing back in a 3-5-2. I know we never saw him play that position a lot, but there was a few times that he played it.
He did it for United at times, didn't he? I'm sure.
Yeah. And I think he pretty much his game was what you would see a modern day right wing back now. He wasn't exactly a dribbler, was he? He wasn't. He wouldn't have played right of a front three like we see now. So I think he would have been more of an attacking fullback type wing back. Anyway, Back three of Rio, Ferdinand, Tony Adams and John Terry. I think Rio and John Terry are the best two centre-backs of the Premier League ever, for what they've won, for how they've performed and for the attributes they bring. It's unlikely we'll ever have better centre-backs. And I think Adams was the best from the era just before that. And like you say, Ben, Euro 96, he was exceptional. And he's kind of the crossover period when Wenger came, and he sort of survived and adjusted his game to suit the way football was going. So that he was a special player. And I've heard John Terry speak about him as his role model and his idol growing up and whatnot. So, yeah, Beckham right wing back, Ashley Cole left wing back. I've got to say, Ben, like Stuart Pearce, like decent player, but Ashley Cole's regarded as the best fullback of all time by a lot of people.
Chelsea fans.
When you're talking about left backs, you might only go sort of Roberto Carlos, Maldini as being anywhere near Ashley Cole, and you've thrown Pearce in, which I'm baffled. I'm baffled by.
You're baffled by Stuart Pearce. You're baffled by. I mean, I understand Ashley Cole. Don't get me wrong. What a player, and yeah, probably. You know, we've got to be different in some respects. Probably comes out right up there, but you can't be baffled by Stuart Pearce, Jody. There's no.
I thought. I actually, because when we did this, I didn't know if you were going to ask us for a bench, and I put Pearce on the bench because he could play left at the back three or left wing back. I remember when we went to three at the back in the Euros, he played left centre half at times. So yeah, Pearce ain't a million miles away, but when you've got a player as outstanding as Ashley Cole to leave him out, I think he's probably our most consistent world class player of all time. Just consistently outstanding in his position. I think we've had lots of people who have been good through periods, but Ashley Cole, like we said earlier, I think 126 caps or something. It's crazy. Midfield, I've gone for Steven Gerrard and Brian Robson. Robson, I know it was the start of the Premier League era, but I did check. He's won 2 Premier Leagues, so Ferguson kept him involved at the end. The reason I've gone for Brian Robson is I just who like in this I'd sort of play him as the holding midfielder. I know that he was more of a number 8, but I play him as a holding midfielder. I can't, him, Paul Ince, people like that, maybe. Who else has been outstanding? Then I saw a quote from Bobby Robson saying that Shearer and Brian Robson were the 2 best British players that he ever coached. So for him to say that ahead of the likes of Gascoigne and Lineker and people like that, Brian Robson must have been pretty special. This one is slightly controversial, so I did read up on it. Captained England 65 times. Obviously, he was captain of Man United for a long time. He went to 3 or 4 World Cups. He for me, deserves to get in. Gascoigne in front of him. So I've left Lampard out, which for me is difficult because Lampard is kind of like the player as a manager you would want. He was robust, never missed a game. I think he holds the outfield record for consecutive games played. He's the all-time goal scorer for Chelsea, and he's not even a forward. He's the Premier League's midfield all-time goal scorer. Jim's just told us he's England's midfield all-time goal scorer. I think he was reliable. Like there was times when they were trying to find a way of playing them all in there, Lampard would end up playing as the holder, and that was never going to get the best out of him, but that shows how versatile and how intelligent he was as well. And I've got a story of watching Lampard. I was on the staff at Colchester United. They got the first team got to the FA Cup 3rd round at Stamford Bridge, and Mourinho kind of played a bit, a shadow 11 really, and Colchester went 1-0 up. So at half time he brought on Lampard and Cole. And I mean, the midfield before that was Lassana, Diarra and Manish. So it weren't a bad midfield. They were well, international players. He brought on Lampard and Joe Cole second half. And I remember thinking, I've just seen the difference between a Premier League player and a world-class player. Because Lampard came on and just controlled every element of the game. Got it off the back 4, fed the wide players, went and got it back off the wide players, switched play, made the box, broke up play, just looked like a level above. Obviously, he was a level above Colchester, but he looked a level above those fringe Chelsea players as well. And I realised that, because I'd been guilty of saying Lampard was just a goal scorer, bit overweight, nicks a goal. But I realised on that day that he was far, far more than that. And then from that point, he got better and better and better and better. So How I've left him out, I don't know.
I was going to say all that. He's left him out.
No.
So you just
Gaza, it's a sentimental one, isn't it? It's like Italian 90, he was unbelievable. Euro 96, he was unbelievable. He's a flawed genius. The one thing he brings to the team, what probably none of the other players in the 11s we've heard so far, is he could carry the ball as well. He was a midfielder that could drive past people with the ball, break the lines with the ball. And I think that made him quite unique. And again, you hear top players talk about him. They say he was possibly the best player in the world. And then the front two, I've gone for Shearer and Owen. And I've listened to everyone's arguments, and everyone's got really valid points. But I've kind of gone for like them at their best as opposed to their career. I mean, Shearer had a phenomenal career, and again, he turned up and scored goals in tournaments. But a bit like Bakes said, like, what could Owen have been? I mean, he did win the Ballon d'Or in what was a relatively short career. He got a massive move to Real Madrid when that wasn't very common. That didn't happen very often. You remember him in those early Premier League years. You remember him as a teenager bursting on the scene for England. He was almost unplayable. And then even at the end of his career, I mean, if people like Rooney hadn't come through, then we probably would have continued to persist with Owen at England, because he did adapt and become more of a sort of a penalty box striker, didn't he? His movement was good and he was a great finisher. But when he first came onto the scene, he was something like we'd never really seen before for England and at the time probably in the world. So, Shearer and Owen.
So that's Jodie's team. Let's obviously really good reasons behind all those choices. Jim, let's throw it open to you first of all for review, shall we say?
Robson, great shout. I didn't actually think he'd actually qualify for the 90. 92 was when the Premier League started, wasn't it? So, I mean, just interestingly, when I joined the job I'm doing now, you had to write an essay on your first day when you joined about who you admire the most in public life. And I put down Robson. So I wrote a little thing about him, about his leadership. He's never say die attitude. That's a great shout, that one. Front two, I'll get that. The front two, I think Bakes and Jodie have spoken to death about Owen, quality player. I think I left him out, to be fair, because of the amount of injuries and that. Yeah, ain't a bad side, that. It won't be mine. Ain't a bad side, though.
So just on Robson, I want to just go back to Robson before I get Bakes' thoughts on that. I'd put Paul Ince in my team as a holding midfielder, and I was going practical, and I was thinking, well, actually, Lampard doesn't do it, Scholes doesn't do it, Gerrard doesn't do it. You can't really ask Beckham to be that one that gets in and makes the tackles. So I thought, Ince, you've gone Robson. Was it always Robson for you to play that role, or do you think was anyone tempted to put Paul Ince in?
Yeah, no, it was. I think I said a minute ago, it was kind of between Robson and Ince. I mean, I was quite young at the end of Robson's career, but I've obviously watched football from previous years. But it's more a case of what I've heard top people say about him. And when you look how Ferguson dismantled Man United to rebuild it, Robson was pretty much the only one he kept from the previous era and kept him around, well, almost until his legs almost fell off. So I think, like Jim said, he was obviously a hell of a leader. I mean, he was known as Captain Marvel. And he played it as part of an England team that was actually quite successful as well. I mean, like World Cup in '86, it was only Maradona's unbelievable performance and the handball that knocked England out. And I think Jim might correct me, or Bakes might. He was in the squad in Italia '90 as well, weren't he? But dislocated his shoulder or something. Yeah,
he was just coming back from that dislocated shoulder, wasn't he?
So he was part of that squad as well, and. He was a special player. I'd like to have seen more of him, but like I say, I was trying to look for that sort of defensive-minded warrior type midfielder, and that's who I went for.
Right, Neil. Obviously, we're going to see your team in a minute, but is there anything on there that you before we put yours up that you disagree with?
Well, I'm not going to call it a fab team again because Coops will hammer me, but no, I mean it's some fantastic players. I think I've never been one for a three at the back, so I wouldn't go with it for that reason. But I totally get why Jodie's done it, to sort of get certain players in probably in their best positions, and as you say with Terry and Ferdinand, and then obviously Tony Adams. It's 3 unbelievable centre halves, isn't it? So no, it's a great team. As I said earlier, I was very close to putting Owen in myself because just how electric he was. I do like a bit of pace, and he had that in abundance. Which, you know, when you talk of Shearer, Rooney, they didn't have that pace, and Michael Owen did have that pace. So I can totally see why he put him in.
Well, actually, and just on the formation before we see Neil's, one of England's most successful performances at a tournament, actually finished it with 3 at the back, and that was Italia 90. They changed formation as they went out the group stage and did very well with 3 at the back. That was some team. Right, let's get your team up then, Neil. This is what you went for. Talk us through your choices and your formation.
Yeah, so back 4 again. Well, keeper. I think we've all had Seaman in, so you know that's a bit of a no-brainer. Back 4 again. We've discussed. I'd prefer to try and find somebody else at right back because whilst I like Gary Neville, I wouldn't say he was unbelievable, but Ashley Cole, John Terry, Ferdinand just pick themselves. I think they're all class in their own right. But I think Gary Neville got in on the basis that we haven't had, you know, too many world class right backs, and obviously his partnership with Beckham. Beckham for me is a no brainer. Probably one of the best crossers of the ball I've ever seen. He was a leader as well, and for me, he worked hard. He worked hard for the team, and that's what I like in players. And I don't know why. Whenever I've had a side, we've always had a right side that tends to be a hard working side, and a left hand side which tends to get on more. I don't know quite why, and to be honest, my side probably replicates that. Putting in Raheem Sterling is a big call, really, because he hasn't really done it for England. I know recently he started to, you know, score goals. I've put him in mainly because of his pace. I think he's frightening on his day. I think he's frightening in the Premier League, and I do think that he will end up being, you know, an unbelievable player for England for years to come. Again, we've not been blessed in the Premier League years with a left winger, a brilliant left winger. I know obviously years and years ago we had John Barnes and whatever else, but I wouldn't say we've been blessed with unbelievable choices on the left hand side. So that's why I've stuck him in. I stuck him in because I wanted to go with an out and out 4-4-2.
No Joe Cole.
No Joe Cole. I like Joe Cole. You know, obviously being a West Ham fan, he was class, but. Again, I think that wasn't his position. You know, I know he got pushed out there quite a bit for England, and he did a good job, but not for me in there. I'd rather have the pace of Sterling getting in behind. The midfield too, I've left out Lampard as well. Lampard, as everyone said, unbelievable. You know, great player. He had a knack of arriving late in the box and scoring goals and whatever else, but I couldn't put Lampard and Gerrard in together in a 4-4-2. They never really did it together, and for me, I've just favoured Gerrard over Lampard just because I don't know. He's just got that a little bit more about him as a person, maybe on the pitch. You know, if I was playing as a centre half and Gerrard was in front of me, I'd feel inspired by him because he made things happen. You know, he sort of took the game by the scruff of the neck. He could play those 70-yard balls. He would work hard, and for me, he just got the edge over Lampard. His goal scoring record not as good as Lampard, no doubt, but still pretty decent. And I've gone for Scholes. I've gone for Scholes just because, you know, I think he was just a really, really tidy player. Loads of ability, and I just think that the two of them, if they had played more as a two, may have complemented each other. That's why I've gone with that. You know, you can look at. It's so difficult not to put Lampard in Coops because he was such a good player, but I've just had to go with Gerrard. And then up front, Wayne Rooney. Well, as Coop said, you know, he's an all-time goal scorer, and then Shearer as well. You know, he's the leading goal scorer in the Premier League. He was just he was just a unit. He was just a unit. Whether those two would play well together, probably not. I'm not convinced they would, but I just like the pair of them, and that's why I've gone for them.
Before I bring Jim in to comment, I want Jim and Jody to comment again on the Lampard versus Scholes issue. Where they're both great players, we know that, and we do give each other a hard time, but we do recognise that they've both got a place. I just want to give you some, because Jim brought in some stats earlier on Lampard in England, and I said that the criteria here was a bit of both. And Lampard is by far the better record with assists, as Jody mentioned, for England. Premier League era and their entire careers, Paul Scholes, Frank Lampard. Paul Scholes, 11 Premier League titles. 11. Frank Lampard, 3. Paul Scholes, 3 FA Cups. Frank Lampard, 4 FA Cups. Paul Scholes, 2 League Cups. Lampard the same. Champions League, 2 for Scholes, 1 for Lampard. That's the reasoning, isn't it, Neil? Before we go for Jim again, that's the reasoning that guys.
Don't try and stitch me up. Listen, it is a tough call. I think the three of them were probably at their best at the same time in their careers. They were all three of them, Gerrard, Scholes, and Lampard, fantastic players. How we never won anything with those in the side, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, Scholes. I don't know what, as Jody said earlier, all the ex-pros that talk about him, all the players that played against Scholes, they pick him out. They pick him out as one of the best players they played with or played against. I think we've all had players in our team that may not necessarily score all the goals and set the world alight, but you want them in your team every week. And I think Scholes was probably one of those players, one of those types of players. I think he saw things that others might not have done. And that's the only reason. Jim,
but so let's get a question to you here as a manager. If we're looking at these teams, and I know it's very close, and obviously you're very passionate about Lampard, if you were to take out Gerrard and put Scholes and Lampard in a midfield, and let's say you had Ince or Robson as a holding midfielder, those two, would it be fair to say, when you look at Scholes' Premier League stats, now let's, and I'm not just picking here, Gerrard's never won the Premier League. Scholes has won it 11 times.
Frank Lampard. You're talking about teams here, not players.
But you play in the teams made by the players. I'm sure Scholes has played a massive part in winning those 11 titles with players. I'm talking about players. I'm not saying Man United have won X amount of titles. I'm saying Scholes has won 11. So if you're
but you could put Gerrard in the Man United team and neither won 11.
But he didn't go. He wasn't though. That's the thing.
Man United team and neither won 15.
No, that's rubbish. So what I'm saying here, Jim, is actually it's about formation, how you want to play, and if we're looking at that, maybe Gerrard misses out. If Lampard and Scholes play together, they've probably got the better stats between them more than Gerrard has.
It's something interesting for you. Gerrard, Houllier moved him out of centre midfield. Benitez moved him out of centre midfield. Sven-Goran Eriksson moved him out of centre midfield. They always kept Lampard in there.
Jim, what do you think?
I'll pick Gerrard probably because of like what Bake said. There's just something about watching Gerrard that you feel that he could do things the other two can't do. Yeah, I've never had the opportunity of working closely with any of them, but you watch Gerrard and you just think he could just take a game over in either box. Penalty box to penalty box, everywhere all over the pitch. Whether it was a big tackle, whether it was a driving run, whether it was scoring a header on a corner, whatever, he could do it all. Scholes, I don't think he could do it all. He's a little 5'7", floating around, touch. I don't think he could ever just take a game by the scruff of the neck, box to box. He could run it possession-wise, he could play a clever pass. Lampard, I just don't. He was like the statistical machine, and he's obviously a winner. And he obviously had the best eye for goal out of all of them, but I don't think he had the athleticism of like a Gerrard. I don't recall Lampard sort of making those galloping runs, picking the ball up on the edge of his own area, and next minute he's on the edge of the other team's area. So Gerrard could do things the other two couldn't do. That's why I think everyone ends up leaning towards Gerrard.
So Jim,
as much as I hate doing it, I've been a Chelsea fan my whole life. Lampard's been unbelievable, but when push comes to shove in these debates and they go Lampard or Gerrard, I don't know how you could not say it's so hard. How do you leave a Gerrard out? Although those managers I just mentioned didn't trust him in centre mid, they moved him out.
Jim,
like Liverpool at their best had Mascherano and Alonso, and give Gerrard a free roll. Because he was a bit of a loose cannon, Gerrard. You can't forget that. He'd go and tackle the left back. So could you play him centre mid in a 4-4-2?
I've got to move it on, Jody, only because we have to. Well, I haven't told anybody this, but we've got to agree on an 11 before we go. So, Jim, what would you say to the stats at Scholes in the Premier League? Do you leave Gerrard out then, or are you still sticking by your team?
No, I wouldn't swap Gerrard for Scholes. Good stats, really. Scholes winning stuff with Man United, but you've got to remember, Man United were probably the best side in Europe at that time as well. When Chelsea won the Champions League, we were nowhere near the best side in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, we were lucky to beat Barcelona in the semi-final, and most definitely lucky to beat Bayern in the final. So I mean, I agree with Jody in some points in relation to. I think the stats you put forward about Scholes winning all this, winning all that. He was playing for the best side in Europe at the time.
Exactly. If you show the individual stats, Lampard beats Scholes hands down.
Yeah.
Games played, goals scored, assists.
Lack of sending offs. I mean, Scholesy for me, I did consider Scholes, but he can't tackle. He cannot tackle. He gets quite a few red cards in his time. It'd be interesting how many red cards he gets. Quality player, but I wouldn't change him, mate.
But who's the guy that plays?
Lampard and Gerrard in the same side, would you? In the same England team.
Not in a 4-4-2. No.
Right,
but you're right. Not in a 4-4-2. I think what the trick we missed, like England back then, was we stuck with a 4-4-2. It was our DNA.
Yeah.
And really, we probably should have played Jim's diamond with the players we had.
Yeah.
Probably should have let Beckham come in a little bit narrower, and we didn't have a left winger like you said. So it might have been Lampard playing left of a free like he did for Chelsea, Scholes or Gerrard at the base and the other one at the top. Would have been the best way, but unfortunately we never saw it.
Just coming on Jim's argument there, Bakes, I'm just looking at who's that guy from Maidenhead who's a striker. He scored a ridiculous amount of goals in one season. Was it? Yeah, 55 or something.
Yeah,
you can't have that argument then. Because he played for Chelsea, he's better because he's playing in a poorer team. Because then old Dave Tarpey would say, well, actually, I've got a better record than any striker in the country because I scored 50 odd goals in a season.
It's not a poorer team, Ben. When Lampard, get the stats of when from Lampard joined Chelsea and compare him to Scholes.
Jim just said it was at Chelsea. Obviously, was a poor Scholes, and this is a fair argument. Jim said Scholes playing a better team.
There's a poor team.
Yeah,
when Chelsea were winning Premier League back to back under Mourinho, they were far better than Man United.
Yeah.
They conceded 15 goals in the whole season.
So you're saying that Chelsea are better than any Man United team that's played in the Premier League in those particular seasons?
I'd say the 1999 Man United treble winners were very good. But
the best,
Chelsea
Jody, the best.
Chelsea 04-05 with Drogba, Robin, Duff, Lampard, Makelele, Terry, Carvalho, Cech. That team is pretty special, Ben.
That team is really. Let's just say
they were the points record holder until Man City broke it last year.
No, brilliant. Yeah.
Goals ever.
Very special team, that Chelsea team. I'm just going to say very special, but not as good as the 99 Man United team, because the 99 Man United team won the treble. They won the European Cup, the FA Cup and the Premier League. These things speak for themselves.
I think Chelsea beat them twice that season.
Don't matter. They still won the treble, didn't they? So, listen, we got to move this on. I've already decided what the topic is going to be for next week. It's going to be Premier League all-time 11. We're going to have to do that because that's going to be really interesting. Forget England. Right, what we're going to do now is we're going to decide in the next 10 minutes exactly what our lineup should be. So let's get all the teams up here. I know we're going to take us off the screen. So let me just get let's just get the graphic off the screen so we can see this as well. So these are the teams that we've got. We've got to get this down into one 11. Let's start with the goalkeeper because it's going to be the only area that we're going to agree on.
Hang on, have we not got to agree the shape?
I guess so, but I think for now we're trying to get 11 players. But yeah, you're right, Neil. Let's agree the formation. Are we agreed that a diamond probably suits? I know Jody went for something different, and I know that you went for 4-4-2. But would we say on balance with Jim and I 2-1 there that the diamond's going to be the best formation to start with?
I just think you've got to get more than two midfielders in because that's where England were so strong individually. So we might as well load up the midfield.
Okay, so we're going to go for a diamond. I think we're all agreed that David Seaman is going to be the goalkeeper. I think we're all agreed that Gary Neville is going to be the right back, or are we going to chuck Beckham in there? What do we agree on that?
For me, Neville.
Yeah, in a 4-4-2, Beckham never played right back, but it just, as good as Neville was, do you really want him in your England all-time 11?
But it does show that right backs, we just haven't had them, have we? You know, I was trying to think through, and it's just like we haven't really had them at all.
Okay, so
I'm not trying to detract from his career, but he's just kind of workmanlike, wasn't he? He was workmanlike, and he had a great character, and he was a grafter, and.
I don't see who else we're going to put out there unless we deploy like Rio at right back. I don't.
Gerrard? What about Gerrard?
Gerrard's a good shout, actually. That would solve a few of our problems. Are we going to say that we give Steven Gerrard a right back berth? What do you think, Jim? No? You're sticking with Neville. All right, let's stick with Gary Neville at right back then. I think, although Tony Adams, this is the next issue. So we've got Adams, Ferdinand and Terry, 3 amazing centre-backs. We've got to choose 2 of those. Jim, if you were going to choose 2 of them, who would it be?
I'd stick with my 2. Adams, very, very close to it. I mean, very close. If I get outvoted by it, it doesn't bother me because Adams is quality. But I would still stick with Terry and Ferdinand for the reasons I gave earlier. Just better in possession of the ball than Adams.
I have to say, the only reason that I went for Adams and Ferdinand and not Adams and Terry was simply because working off that theory of you need one centre-back with a bit of pace. I'm going to stick with Adams and Ferdinand as my choice. Jody, we've got a 2 now. You were in a 3, so now you've given yourself a bit of a problem. If you had to choose 2, who would it be?
No problem. Rio and Terry.
So this is quite an interesting one, Neil. What would you choose if you've got 2 at the back? You're sticking with what you got?
Ferdinand and Terry.
Okay, so
great partnership.
So Ferdinand and Terry at the back. Next is left back. Now, I just want to bring one thing in. I know I'm going to get outvoted here, but that's fine. And I just want to bring this discussion in. And please, please, please do get involved in this. If you've watched all the way through, let us know what you think. Let us know your team in the comments. I'm fascinated to hear from you. So Stuart Pearce, 78 England caps. And I want to put one other thing in, and again, I know I'm going to get outvoted here, but I want to put one other reason for Stuart Pearce. Jody mentioned it before. He said that England team, with those players, and we're talking about the likes of Cole and Neville and Ferdinand and Terry, really, you have to say, underperformed for who they were. We look at...
I don't know. Did I say that?
You actually used the word to one of the players. You said about having character and about performing on the biggest stage. I think you were talking, I'm trying to think who you were talking about in your team, but you were saying about actually performing, Beckham I think it was, actually performed for England on the big occasion. So Stuart,
I think that England, the golden generation, get a bit of stick, unfair stick. They pretty much only went out on penalties.
So I haven't got their record in front of me, but I know there was 2 quarterfinals in there, and there wasn't any better than that. So we're talking about
penalties is a lottery,
but it's still fine. But that's quarterfinals. When we look at Stuart Pearce, 2 semi-finals for England, 78 caps, 2 semi-finals, amazing left back, and not only that, missed a penalty in Italia 90 and stepped up in Euro 96 at Wembley against Germany and smashed his penalty in. Now, we've talked about leaders and captains and proper men on this show before. You don't get much better than that, do you?
He was a character, he was a leader, but he wasn't Ashley Cole. Ashley Cole, was by far a better left back, all-round left back than Stuart Pearce. Quality-wise, Ashley Cole was nigh on impossible to get past. Defensively, he was so good. Going forward, he was so good. For me, it's not even a conversation.
I think
you remember those battles between Ashley Cole and Ronaldo.
I was just going to say that.
He was the one defender that could go toe to toe with Ronaldo.
So we're agreed though. If we have to have a substitute left back,
the same with Jody. Like it was really good of him to let Ronaldo out of his pocket so he could go on and have a good career, wasn't it? That is how good Ashley Cole was.
I was at the Arsenal Man United final at the Millennium Stadium when Vieira scored the penalty in the shootout. And I was sat low down on the side. So to see Cole against Ronaldo from like 5 yards away, the athleticism of both of them was just unreal. I mean, Ronaldo is iconic, but Ashley Cole could lock him down for a game.
Yeah, I think we're agreed that Ashley Cole going in, a wonderful player, and I'm sure if we had a substitute left back, then Stuart Pearce would get in there. Right, let's move to where it gets more interesting because we were fairly in agreement on the back 5. So midfield, we've gone with a diamond. So who's holding our midfield? We've got Brian Robson, Gerrard. You could put Beckham there. You could put Scholes there. He's a playmaker. Jim, we'll start with you. We've gone with a diamond now. Who are you going to put in as your holding midfield player?
Yeah, I'm changing. I'm going to go with Brian Robson.
Okay, so Brian Robson.
He qualified in that era all day long for me. Brilliant.
I'm going to... It's a difficult one with this. I think, for me, trying to get everybody in this team, I may have changed my mind slightly on something, but trying to get everyone in this team, I would put Paul Scholes in there, because I think that's the only way to get him in. And I think, actually, getting the ball off the back four, because you've got such a good defenders in defence, getting the ball off the back four, you wouldn't want anyone else to get that ball off the back four. Possibly Beckham, but Scholes for me. So I'm going to go Scholes. Jody, who would you have on the holding midfielder?
I'll stick with Brian Robson.
Neil.
Well, I didn't see enough of Brian Robson, if I'm brutally honest, to sit there and go, yeah, fantastic. I mean, his record clearly speaks for itself. So I wouldn't argue. I mean, out of all the players that we've talked about, I would probably have Gerrard in that holding role, just because how he can spray a ball, and I think that he can push forward as well still, and I think he can protect the back four. But I'm happy with Robson.
Okay, so
I've seen England managers play. This is what a problem position it was. We've seen Ledley King play there, Gareth Southgate play there. Phil Jones has played there.
God, yeah.
We've seen some absolute rascals play holding midfield for England. So it shows that it's not an easy position.
So let's go with Brian Robson then. I think we're all in agreement then that he goes in. So now we've got... let's look at the two midfield players that I guess aren't at the tip of the diamond. This is going to be the biggest battle. Jim, if you had two in there, what are you sticking with? What are you going with now?
Yeah, Beck's on the right, Lampard on the left. Their natural position for their clubs, and it ain't worth going over old ground. I'd go those two.
Okay, Neil, what would you go with?
God, it's so hard, isn't it? It's so hard. Because in a diamond, I would probably have Gerrard and Lampard in the team, possibly.
Same here. Same here.
But then I'd want Beckham in the team, and I wouldn't put Beckham in the hole. And so hard. I don't know. I really don't know. I'll go with whatever Jim says.
So interestingly now, I think for me, the two positions that I'm looking at would be Beckham and Gascoigne. And it's that balance between, are you going for a team that you think with Robson, Gerrard, Lampard and Scholes that would be outstanding? Would you, are we going the criteria of the Premier League? If we're going on stats and...
Who's picked Scholes?
Yeah. We haven't picked Scholes yet, apart from you, Ben.
None of us have mentioned him.
No, but I'm just having my turn, Jody, just to say who I'd play in those positions.
That's what we've got.
No, I haven't said that. I just said I was just having a little go at selecting the team. So obviously I went with, in my two in the midfield, I went with Beckham and Scholes. It's very difficult. Now we've taken Gerrard out. Does he not go in at all? Because Robson's gone in there.
For me, if you're going with a diamond, I think Gazza does fit that role in behind the front two. So, whilst I know he hasn't had an unbelievable career in the Premier League as such, he still played in the Premier League and he was an unbelievable player, and that position suits him. So for me, Gazza goes in there. If you've got Brian Robson sitting, that leaves you two players. And for me, as good as David Beckham is, and I love David Beckham, I wouldn't have David Beckham in my diamond. So I would have Lampard and Gerrard. So I would have Brian Robson, Lampard on the left, Gerrard on the right, and Gazza in the hole.
So just the only thing I'm going to say against that before I come to Jody, and this is obviously just to discuss to get this in, for me, when you're talking about that kind of team now, you've got too much industry. You've got to... for me, I agree that Lampard or Gerrard have to go in. I'm actually swinging towards Lampard. I think I agree with what Jody said. I think the middle of the field... Lampard's just stats are great for England. I do get that. Now you've put Robson in instead of Gerrard in front, which I agree with as well. I think you've got to have... You need long-range passing. You need the passing ability of Beckham and Scholes, for me, is far better than Lampard and Gerrard. So if you're going to put Lampard in, I think you need a Beckham or a Scholes. That's my opinion. Jody, we'll come to you now because it's really on you to decide.
I I think you're underestimating the passing ability of Gerrard and Lampard. But I agree with Bakes. Bakes is, if we're going to Diamond, I think you have to get Gazza in. I think he turned up on the massive stages and was our most creative player. We've all agreed on Robson's career and leadership skills and ability to play that role. And then I think there's no question Gerrard Lampard. Beckham was a wide player. He wasn't a central player. When we tried to play him in central positions, I don't ever think he was as good as when he played on the right. I think the Diamond's perfect for Gerrard, like sort of right at the centre. And like I say, Lampard played that role for Chelsea, left of a midfield three. So mine would be, like he said, Robson, Gerrard, Lampard, Gazza.
So Robson, Gerrard, Lampard. Obviously we've got those three in the midfield. We'll just go to Jim though. Do you agree on Gascoigne? Because we're going to have a problem here. We choose the two strikers. We've got the likes of Shearer. We've probably got Shearer, Owen, Rooney and Kane. Would Rooney have a shout to go in Gascoigne's position, or is that Gascoigne's? Do we think of longevity of the Premier League?
Gascoigne's for me.
Okay.
Drives with the ball at his feet, yeah. With those three you mentioned before as well. Yeah, I'll put Bex in sentimental reasons, I suppose. But so, yeah, Gerrard and Lampard is definitely a better balance with Robson behind as well and Gascoigne at the tip. Okay,
so we've only got two strikers to choose now. Do let us know what you think in the comments. We've got two players to choose from. The players that have been mentioned in this position are Rooney, who is obviously England's all-time greatest goal scorer, Harry Kane. We've got Michael Owen, we've got Teddy Sheringham, we've got Alan Shearer. Those are the players that we've mentioned. Jim, what would you be doing with a front two? Are you sticking with what you went with?
No.
He can change his mind again.
No, because I've listened to the other guys' arguments, and I think they've put forward better cases. For me, I'd go with Shearer and Owen.
Oh.
Shearer.
Two changes.
So Shearer and Owen. I think listening to everything, I would probably now change for Shearer and Rooney, because I just don't know, having listened to the arguments, how you could ever leave Rooney out. And I think, as Jody was right, he said there's so much more in his game. So Jim would go for Shearer and Owen. I think you've got to go Shearer and Rooney. Jody, let's come to you next. What would you think for a front two?
I still, if I was picking a team, as in to play, I still think I would have gone Shearer and Owen. But given what we're trying to do here, I'm going to go Rooney as well. So I'll say Shearer and Rooney.
Oh,
we're trying to come to an agreement.
Yeah, no, I know, but that's why I was.
My original team was Shearer and Owen, and if I was picking a team to play tomorrow, it would be Shearer and Owen, because I think they would complement each other.
That's where I was going with it. As much as I'd put Rooney in my side, I would want Rooney in the team because of his record and everything, but for an actual team that you're putting out, again, I talk about pace. And if we're talking about Owen in his prime, he was just electric and playing off the big man in Shearer. Shearer was a great target man as well, and I'd probably whack him.
Could we just playing devil's advocate? Could we leave Shearer out then? Could it be Owen and Rooney?
No.
I think Shearer has to go. He's just.
Yeah, I mean, I've picked Shearer, but I'm just.
It could be. I mean, it could be.
Time record.
It could be. But for me, I think we've made the right decision in. I have to say, and I'm only fair. The midfield, I do think we've made the right decision, despite
no skulls.
Despite the 11 Premier League titles, that's fine, and I do agree with that. But I do think the right decision would be to have Rooney and Shearer, because
I can't believe we've left Ryan Giggs out.
Yeah. Interestingly, we're just going to do the skipper really quickly of this, and that will be interesting, because if you look at that, there's a lot of leaders there, but
there's only one.
No, it's only one for me as well.
See, do you know what?
But what if we are not all saying the same one?
Same one as
John Terry in it. It's John Terry all day long.
Yeah, John Terry.
For me, John Terry.
Yeah, see, I would have. For me, it depends when you're looking at this now. I think for me, I do. The only thing I would say against John Terry is, and you could say it's against.
He possibly slept with Wayne Bridges' girlfriend.
I think the only thing I would say against John Terry is. I just don't know how much of a. It depends what you're talking. Team leader, yeah, I get it, but role model. I think Brian Robson and Alan Shearer for me would stand out as definite vice captains if you're going to go down the John Terry route. But It's another
I heard
discussion.
Gary Neville. I heard Gary Neville speaking about his all-time 11, and he was asked about the best captain that he'd ever played under. Bear in mind, he played all that time for Man United, and I think he was David Beckham's best man, and blah blah blah. He said John Terry.
Yeah, he's obviously got something about him.
He said John Terry was the best captain he played under.
When we just quickly, because I know this has been a bumper extra show for you, and I wanted to mention the Giggs thing in a minute, but just quickly, when you look down that list of players, we talk about a lack of leaders now, and I know that it's a younger England team, and I know it's probably a bit unfair, but when you look at that list, there are some big leaders in that team, aren't there? You know, we're all saying John Terry, or you guys are saying John Terry, but you look at the likes of Shearer and Gerrard and Lampard and Robson, that's not bad, is it, as far as leaders?
No, that is a team of leaders, but I'm sure that in 15, 20 years' time, when you're looking back on players now, I'm sure there'll probably be, we'll probably look back on it and go, yeah, he was a leader. And whilst we've got a young England side at the moment, you know, I'm sure a number of them will sort of fall into that category.
I think Stuart Pearce as well. He's on our bench. He would be a great leader.
Is he the only one on the bench?
Yeah, I think he is actually. So the only other thing I wanted to say, I was just going to mention it. If we talked about how they achieve, but if Ryan Giggs, I know he played for England schoolboys, would have been playing for England, A, do you think England would have won something? I know that's a difficult question, but B, would he have made that team of yours if Ryan Giggs was English?
Well, it would have allowed them to play 4-4-2 properly rather than playing 4-4-2 with someone who wasn't a left midfielder.
Yeah,
I think it would have made a big difference. I think he was a special player, wasn't he? You know, Ryan Giggs, and I think that would have maybe given us that final little bit that may have got us to, you know, that final and maybe won, you know, the Euros or the World Cup. I think he might have made that difference.
It's an interesting debate, and it's going to be an interesting debate next week because I am going to set us the task of finding our all-time Premier League 11. So that means everybody doesn't have to be English; they just need to have played in the Premier League, and what your all-time 11 will be. So you can have a think about that during the week and let us know in the comments. We'll get a poll going for certain positions as well. So that is going to be a good one for you guys to go away for next week.
George Williams doesn't stop it, surely, isn't he?
What's that, sorry?
Chelsea 2005.
I actually think that it will be a tougher debate because I think some of the same areas are going to come up, and I know one already. When we'll just do a little teaser for next week is, you know, the midfield. When we talk about Scholes or having won, if we're talking about Premier League and we're going away from England, 11 Premier League titles, and you're looking at Gerrard and Lampard with the stats that he's got in the Premier League, which I agree with you, Jim, they're terrific. Gerrard looks like he might miss out. If I was doing a 4-4-2, would you miss Gerrard out? And then some people would say you couldn't do that in the Premier League era. So already you can see the conversations we're going to have.
Has Scholes been playing you today by any chance?
He's just a fantastic player, Neil. He's a fantastic player. But as is Lampard and as is obviously Gerrard as well. It's not just English players. We'll do a Premier League 11, so that opens up all sorts of different. I think our teams will be a lot different. I think they were fairly similar today. I think they'll be a lot different come next week. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure to do this with you. I know we've had a few disagreements along the way, but there's a lot of respect in there, and we've come up with a fairly decent team. Jim, thank you ever so much for joining us as always.
Welcome.
And I'm sure Frank will have some kind words to say about you tonight.
I'm sure.
Jodie, thank you, and Neil, thanks to you as well. Really enjoyed it, and I can't wait for next week to choose our all-time Premier League 11. That's it for the show tonight, a bumper edition. We've chosen our England team. Do let us know if you agree or you disagree, and which players maybe we didn't even talk about that you think should have been in there, and if you agree with our midfield conundrum and if we got it right. We'd love to know your thoughts. And we'd love for you to join us again next week. We'd also love for you to join us on Wednesday for Coach's Corner. You can catch up with Charlotte, Pete and Ian on Wednesday night from 8 o'clock. Until then, take care and we'll see you next time.